This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Joan and Janet are subtle energy empaths who navigate consciousness. Their passion is to support you in your evolution. As consciousness, we are all one. One mind, one heart, free of all limitations. Experience this reality with us and discover how it can make a difference in your daily living. Join us in a state of grace as we explore, with warmth and humor, this thing we call life. Now, here are Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett.
Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We're your co-hosts, Joan Newcomb, coming to you from Tacoma, Washington, and my partner, Janet Barrett, coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Hello, everyone. How nice to be with you again.
We have a very interesting show for you today. We are talking about consciousness and standing in our truths. This time is right for us to access our inner truths. What do you do when our illusions start to fall? Stay tuned because you can discover how to be aligned with your integrity in a state of harmony and grace.
And here's an invitation with you to go deeper with us, to connect with us beyond the show. You can join us at our website, www.consciousconcversationswithjoanandjanet.com. I think I might have added an extra W in there, but anyway, come listen to our podcasts. We have them all there. Both Joan and I write blogs, and they're posted there. You'll find out all about our meetups, Joan up in the Puget Sound area and me here in Portland, Oregon, and all about our sessions where we work one-on-one with clients. So we've got all kinds of information, and Joan's going to give you all the details about all those social media connections.
Yes, so social media. If you love Facebook, like I love Facebook, you will find us on Facebook by looking for our show, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and you can join the group and join the fun. If you want to know more about Janet, her Facebook profile is Janet Barrett, and mine is Joan Newcomb. So hang out with us on Facebook and see all the very interesting things that we post. Now, if you love Twitter, like I love Twitter, we are on Twitter at Joan and Janet. And Janet is on Twitter at Janet Beyond. And I'm on Twitter at Joan Newcomb. And also you can subscribe to us on YouTube. We're putting all our old shows on YouTube as we talk, and that is Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm also on YouTube. Guess what? It's Joan Newcomb, but you can find mine posted on our website because I do a new one every Tuesday, and I post it on our website as well, ConsciousConversationsWithJoanandJanet.com. I'm going to say a little bit about my meetups, and then Janet, you can say a little bit about your meetups and your new groups that are happening. Sound very exciting. So I have a meetup this Sunday on the 4th of March. It's up in Seattle at the Montlake Library. It goes from 2 to 4, and we will be having a Conscious Conversations free meetup there. My next meetup will be in University Place, which is just a little bit south and west of Tacoma, and it'll be at the library next to Whole Foods on the 18th. And then there's the Emerald Spiral Expo that is in Kent, and that goes from 9 to 5. I'm going to be in booth 50, and I'll be doing consciousness sessions. And then at 1 o'clock, I'm going to be doing a talk on living beyond limitations, how to have a life of infinite possibilities. And that's at 1 o'clock at the Emerald Spiral Expo.
What day is that, Joan?
That's a Saturday. The 24th of March, right? I just zoomed right over that, didn't I? Speaking of Zoom, tell us all about what's going on in Portland.
Well, starting tomorrow, March 1st. So whenever you're listening to this, and these groups are reoccurring every week, and you can join us at any time. I'm offering over Zoom video conferencing call groups, just like what we do here. As to the best of our ability, with you being there and me being here. So we have a wonderful time. There are like 6 to 8 people. We've got, we center ourselves in heart-centered awareness, and we just are in the state of where potential is real, like we do here on the show, but in a more intimate situation. And with the video conferencing, you can see each other, so it's live interactive. It's not a webinar or something to listen to or check out about this, because if you're going to spend time in front of your computer, you want it to be quality. So this is, you get that interaction with one another, and I'm very excited. We've done a few test groups. It's going really well, and you can contact me at Janet B at Janet and Beyond, and the groups will be Thursdays 10 a.m. Pacific or Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific, and you can email me and tell me which group you'd like to be, and they're very reasonably priced. You set the price, and I give you some choices there, and we're going to have a great time. So please come join us.
So now what?
Well, what's our subject for today?
We had a really interesting time talking about this. You and I have a planning session, usually a day or so before the show. And so we were talking about a whole bunch of different things. And the one thing I noticed reflecting back on it as well is that you are continually having an inward focus and about having people come out of denial and look at themselves honestly. Mm-hmm. And I was taking the same topic and having an outward focus about speaking your truth and having people finally hear you. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. I think it's a very interesting distinction. So what does standing in our truths mean to you, Janet?
Well, I think my whole focus about life is being able to connect with the core essence of myself, and that is consciousness, and that I have adapted my personality. Janet has shown up and is in this body, and it occupies a certain reference to information around me in my world and environment. And those two places, that deep connection, is not always in sync. There becomes, the mind starts to, because once thought happens, another thought happens. It's fascinating how that does. And so sometimes we can get distracted from what that inner voice is about, that inner truth, that inner centered mechanism of why we are alive. And this is a great time for us clearing what keeps us from being able to be in that place. And it's a little different than what might have been in the past. And that's what's exciting about consciousness. It's always evolving. It's always providing more. And so the opportunities might not have been there in the past are available to us now.
Yes, I'd say the same thing with a couple of different distinctions, but you're mm-hmm. totally correct. Our bodies and our personalities aren't always in sync with ourselves as consciousness. Mm-hmm. And it's just like our computers getting updates. Mm-hmm. It's
that's a good way.
Yeah. Because they're constantly defining or redefining or upgrading, a sense, our ability to connect to the infinite knowledge. And I think of the infinite knowledge as consciousness and the essence of who we are. Mm-hmm. And so it's not really consciousness that is evolving, but the body personality is evolving to accept more consciousness. Right. And what I find is if I'm not in alignment or if I'm not in sync, I'm going to have a reaction to that. And there's a variety of ways that I can feel when that's happening. Sometimes it's confusion, sometimes it's tired, sometimes it's grouchy. The bodies have all sorts of reactions to expansion. But bottom line, what's going on from my perspective is that greater consciousness is coming into form. So the greater consciousness is coming into each of our bodies, and our personalities, and it's illuminating from within, and that's where, you know, it's shining the light of truth on whatever is inside. So for instance, you know, if somebody is a hoarder and you walk in and turn on the lights, it reveals all the boxes and, you know, squirreled away, you know, jars and trash and things like that, because you've turned the light of truth on. So that's kind of what's going on, is that we're also having the light of truth turned on within ourselves. And then from my outward focus is what I'm noticing is that people are speaking their truths out, and they are being heard and accepted by the majority in a way that in the past they would have been silenced and, you know, shunned or, you know, ignored.
Right. For me, you know, when I say consciousness evolving, it's really about consciousness unfolding, and maybe that's the better term for it. Is because consciousness was present first, and we develop around that, and then we have to reconnect to that place, it feels like. But consciousness is always there, and it was there to begin with. And we're just kind of the entertainment factor, because I'm always going to view consciousness, humans, as the human interface of consciousness. And, you know, a rock relates to consciousness in a different vibratory state. And everything is part of consciousness. And so in that unfolding, there's your wisdom, there's your experience is taken into a place of, I get it. That's what was going on. And in this state, you can still use that as a springboard to reaping the wisdom, to enfolding the wisdom, and then the rest of it goes. The pattern goes, the illusion goes, whatever it is. And now you're in a new state of awareness. And that's constantly working all the time if we allow ourselves to be in that state with it. So that's what's important.
That's really juicy stuff. And so everyone hold those thoughts and hold on to your excitement, because we need to take a quick commercial break, but stay tuned because we're going to be telling you more about consciousness and standing in our truths when we come right back.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs. Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet, and we are talking about consciousness and standing in your truths. actually standing in our truths. You can stand in your truth. I'm going to stand in my truth. What are you doing, Janet?
Well, that's the truth of it, right? We each have our truth. And the important thing to remember is our truth can change all the time.
Yes.
And I think people forget that, right? You learn something, you encode an experience, you put your emotional encoding there, and then that becomes your truth. And that's really not your truth. It was just that truth in that moment. And when you stack it up with all the other ones, you can kind of start to see patterns and where things go. So, we use the term standing, and I think it's, that has a directional feel to it, which is really just maybe more of we want to know where we are. We're planting our flag kind of thing, as opposed to, let me just go where I go, and I am different all the time. And those things that are important to anchoring me to this state of mind are really kind of fluid and loose and not so many, right? And it's just embracing life in a different way.
Well, it's interesting because it depends also on how you define truth or what truth is. Mm-hmm. And the thing I notice for myself is that there's kind of a feeling level of truth that is clarity. And for me, I also associate it with being in alignment as consciousness. Mm-hmm. So I have a physical sensation of clarity and alertness when I am in that level of truth. And that's completely different than my interpretation of what truth might be, or my, speaking what is right and just kind of experience of truth. It's a body feeling truth.
It's a very good point. We're all going to experience it differently, and we know what it is when we feel it. And it's when we feel it, and we can feel it emotionally, we can feel it physically, we can feel it, in a cognizant kind of way. So it's different ways of experiencing, but I think every individual has a moment where, that's it, right? And you can spend a lot of time not listening to it. You can spend a lot of time being with it. You can spend a lot of time in some sort of relation to it. And none of it is right, none of it is wrong, because it's not about that. It's just about recognizing that it is present always, and that we have adapted and coped and organized ourselves around that truth. And when you get back into it, you know it. And that's where the power is.
And that kind of essence of truth doesn't waver or vary. That's actually a constant within. But I think our body personality's ability to perceive it or stand for any position of time or stay for any period of time in that truth varies. And I was thinking something, a friend of mine got me hooked on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon, and it takes place in the 50s. And I was riveted because that was when my mother was an adult, and she was so influenced by all those cultural attitudes and restrictions of the 50s. And I was fascinated by how it resonated within me, and how I have a lot of those unconscious restrictions and perceptions in the world. And, on one level back then you could say, well, the truth was you go by your husband's name. The truth was you can't, have your own bank account, all those things like that. And not realize that here it is, 60 years later, and those kind of restrictions are still bumping around in people's psyche. And that's not a truth. That's a lie. Actually.
Yeah, it was an assumption made, right? And so I think where was it? There was something about that I wanted to say. Okay, that kind of went over there. So what was it?
Feminism?
No. those are topics. Let me see. I think it's about, you were asking, how, okay, so we know that inner resonance. We have that core essence and why we might forget it, why we might check out. And I think we have to appreciate how habituated our thinking is in so many patterns all at the same time that we've got it set up to be distracted. And if you can encode and just take this moment, for instance, listeners and whoever, wherever you are, that in the state of awareness, it is always present no matter if you are not noticing it. So whatever constructs you set up, you can always still have this place of awareness. And they don't have to compete, fight, do any of that. It's just always there because it's always there. And my adaptive behaviors around it and in my thinking are on top of that. And so we're going to go in and out of, due to whatever the stress is happening, of awareness. And so you just set it up so that being present, being in the moment, being in your truth, which is kind of all saying the same thing and using different language, is your place of origin. And it all comes from there. And sometimes you're in alignment and in congruency with it. And then sometimes you're not. And that's where you find when you have an intention, you state it, you want this, and you bump up against the expectation. And the expectation that you find out only when you've stated the intention. And you go, oh, okay, that can change too. So it's about being congruent, being in place, in step, in alignment. We have lots of different words for what is at our core essence and how it's expressing in the world. So then you can discuss your hot topics because you go back to this, you're talking about those from within this place. And you'll notice that the rhetoric and the energies downgrade. They soften, they go, oh, they're not there. Can I hear you now? You can't hear people when you're screaming, so.
Yes. And you don't have the urge to scream, I would say.
Right.
Unless you are really attached to those topics, which aren't the truth. And that's, people have a really hard time understanding the difference between an awareness as consciousness and their concepts that they think are truth. You said something earlier, and I've lost the phrase that you said, but it had to do with consciousness being constant. And the picture I always get with that is consciousness is like sunlight. You know, at our essence, we are like sunlight, and the sun is always shining. You know, the sun doesn't experience night, you know, but here we are in the Northwest and there's a really nice thick level of cloud cover today. And, but the sun is above that cloud cover. So we often feel kind of fogged over in our consciousness or
disconnect or something.
Disconnected, exactly. Yeah. And so we're witnessing that in the world today with people having very extreme reactions about things because they're very attached to their concept of, you know, what is their rights or what is right versus what is wrong. And with an obliviousness to the overarching clarity of truth.
Well, that's a wonderful way to look at that. And you mentioned earlier, and I think it's a point really well taken that we can expand on here, was that in all the information that's coming out about our different kinds of experiences, there's more support for those being your truth. And that's kind of different. There's becoming this collective dynamic where information is reaching a big enough that tipping point is there. And so you don't have to feel so isolated in what your truth is, because outside will question your truth all the time. And that's something so we can react in different ways to that. We can hide from it. We can get belligerent. We can get defensive. We can get all kinds of different ways of an adaptation of thinking and behaviors from that. And that's what's exciting about now. And that's why I'm inviting people to go to Core Essence. And from that place, you can allow that to ripple out in perhaps new ways.
So go to coreessence.com. No, what?
Yeah.
I was going to start Googling. I wonder what Core Essence is.
Well, that's heart-centered awareness, right? If we don't want to use the word heart, it's Core Essence. And I think there's a lot of organizations that use that labeling. But it's
one in the UK.
Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with a couple of them. So that's what's different about now. So what we're offering is being in this state first and looking at that wound. And I only use that word because that's the way the human feels it. And in that truth is wounding. And that's your perception. And as consciousness, you can feel in this place where that's not necessarily the feeling that's there under that. And as you hold in an environment that's starting to say, yes, that has happened to me, and I identify with that, and that collective is getting strong enough to instigate change, to instigate us looking at things and maybe respecting people in a different way, and maybe not taking them for granted, or whatever it is. It's you out there are such a wonderful mirror reflection for me about where I am in my life and what's important and how I organize myself. And I look to do that for others. I know I do that for others, right? Because we're always in that state with people. So whether we're conscious or unconscious of it doesn't really matter. But
yes, I was having moments of unconsciousness just then.
Well,
but you know what unconsciousness feels like. You know, unconsciousness feels foggy. It feels vague. Mm-hmm. It feels uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But it may feel familiar. So then it'll be hard for you to say, "Oh, that's uncomfortable," because we get very
right. You get desensitized. Yeah.
Right, exactly, to our discomfort. But I always notice when I'm feeling clear and I'm feeling aligned, and it is this sense of both clarity in my head. It's a clarity within my physical body. There might be a stance of sitting up straighter. And there's a neutrality that comes with it as well. And I have access to sort of seeing the bigger picture about the things that are going on in the world, and may even have some amusement about what's going on in the world, when I would normally have a really big fat opinion.
Yeah. What also comes to mind is people who have maybe spoken in their truth in the past and found no acceptance for it.
Yes.
And so our inclination is to not reveal ourselves because that hurts, right? And when we call into question those things. And so I want to offer everyone that this time is different. You can feel it out there. You can feel connection, and that's the power of connection, is that there are places and people and mediums that you can voice something. And we see it all the time in negative ways and positive ways, with social media and stuff. And everybody's got a blog and a bias. Please, whatever blogs you read, just appreciate the bias and see if that feels good to you, or if it's just mimicking, triggering some response that's that emotional place. And we want to hold out that so many times people don't know what to do with information.
Yes.
They don't know how to handle your stuff, much less their own stuff. And then in this time right now, if you go to heart-centered awareness, you activate that place of awareness, you'll find that it's a little different. It becomes easier. You become more congruent. And, you know, a lot of times being a whistleblower, it doesn't turn out so good for the whistleblower. It's the next generations. And, you know, see, that's a belief too. That's an assumption because
well,
I
and
think
that's a historic belief. I mean, that's
yes,
what has happened.
that's the perspective.
That may not be the case.
And it
right
may
now.
not be the case, but we get to see that. And certainly those people and those experiences know what that turned up for them. But then again, that's also reflective of how they view themselves in the world. And so we're playing the games, our illusions all the time. And so what works for one, the other guy might have a whole different experience out of that. And I think it's important to appreciate that we are each in different places. We are individuals as this collective. And neither's right nor wrong. It's just up to us to go, how do we want to respond to that? Not react, because that's that automatic trigger spot, but in stopping and going, how do I choose to react, to respond? And see, we get those words mixed up all the time. So, anyway.
Well, I find my definition between reaction and responding is that reaction tends to be like a knee-jerk reaction. Mm-hmm. So if I'm reacting to something, it's really, you know, my body's spontaneous response to it without much, you know, without any awareness. Right. And a response is a more empowered stance because it's being able to see the big picture, and then there's an element of choice with how I am going to respond to this.
Right.
And, you know, what you were talking about, which is, you know, standing up and speaking your truth and having your being heard and being accepted now, which wasn't in the past or wasn't even as like last year there were people standing up and speaking and not being heard. So there does seem to be a real change going on with all of that. And it seems to me that people who are whistleblowers now are having less of a backlash than even last year, and I feel like that's part of what the change is all about. It's like we're collectively not tolerating intolerable behavior. Oh, I know, that's the other thing I was reflecting on, is how you'll see people blurt out or respond in ways that are blatantly sexist or racist, and not realize that in the 50s that was totally acceptable. In the 60s, even that was totally, and like, there's something wrong with that? Yes, there is.
I think there was, okay, I got 3 or 4 thoughts going in here.
Yeah.
So I think, one place is when we're talking about reacting, and that's the trigger response, and you respond. That's not to say like first responders. See, they don't call them first reactors. They call them first responders, right? And I think there's a lesson to be heard in that. And when you're in a situation right now, yes, you do respond. It might feel like a reaction, but there's already a premise in place, and you're there to respond. You're already set up to respond, not to react. Because if you react, that could be a problem. You have to be in a mindset that says, okay, I can deal with this, and this will have some effect. And you can't do that when you're in a reactive state too much. So there's that. There's also the, what was it? You brought up some really good points. Let me see here. Oh, man. Where is all that? What is the state? I think the state is openness.
Yes.
I think that's what's happened. That's what's this opening. So all this information, this stuck stuff inside of us is coming out. And no matter the trigger mechanisms, and we can label it a person, a place, or a thing, there's an unfolding, an opening. It's a state of opening that we're seeing. And so stuff can come out like a projectile, or it can come out of, oh, there it is. And there's lots of different ways to react and respond and be in that. So if we all are feeling this openness, call it that. What are you more open to? You're more open to changing how you thought about someone. And that was something, when our illusions start to fall. What happens when, in my state of openness, I'm taking more information in, and what I thought this was, or who that person was, or what this was, my assumptions, those are only assumptions. And I can see where, I need to change that. And so that's a exciting place to be when people are going, that was my assumption. And how you deal with it is where the power is. Because you can take that gently into the night, or you can just be a blaster. So, there's the dynamic in what you're choosing to do with it. So.
Gently into the night, or being a blaster. Is that like a master blaster?
Yeah.
Turner and Mad Max.
Yeah.
Master blaster.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, when you open up something, you never know quite what's going to come out, right? And a lot of things have been under pressure. And they've been under pressure, not just this generation. They've been society's pressure. It's been civilization's pressure. So how all that releases, it can be a slow boat to China, or it can be, you're in rapid zone. So.
Well, you and I in our planning session were talking about the protests, and I was looking at how we have had a series of protests and series of times where there have been more protests than others. And you were relating to what happened in the 60s. And, I was looking far back to the protests that happened in the late 1800s and early 1900s around women getting the vote. Mm-hmm. And the way I look at it when I step back and look at it as consciousness is that it is, we're experiencing a higher octave of the same kind of protest, but what that is about is greater consciousness coming into form and breaking through those restrictions. And I mean, just even getting a visual image of like a corset and the stays that, keeps your body, in an hourglass figure. And those stays are the rigidity and the limitations and injustices of society, and consciousness is expanding beyond them. And sometimes it comes out sort of explosively, like you were talking about.
Well, I think what you're also commenting on is how when stuff reaches a certain point of matter, right? E equals MC2, it takes on its own thing. And society in the late 1800s wasn't the physical population that it is now. And so you start to see enough energy gathering in different locations about the same subject, and all of a sudden there is this network that's happening of collective thought. And so it's not just about you, it's the gal in England there who's experiencing the same kind of vibrancy and resonance, and it'll find itself because we know it does that. So that's what I think, is fascinating when you look at things from an energetic place, how they build and how they come apart, and in that fluctuation of how we and where we are in that fluctuation, and where change is possible. And there's been plenty of places, and I do want to make a comment that those that in New York whenever the women's stuff was, and they put the women in prison, they put them in jail, right. And then they starved them, and they did all these things.
Well, actually, the women starved themselves as well. It was right. And they were force fed, is what they
right, were. And they were, and we are all here because of them. We are all exactly where we are because of them. And we are all here exactly because of them. Everywhere something has happened like that. And we don't necessarily hold it in a conscious state. And this is the dynamic. So when something shows up here, you have all this energy that all of a sudden has a fulcrum for it. And something big will happen. Or some opening shows up. And I think that's where we're at. Because on a global terms, are we any different than we used to be? No, we just now are so immediately connected to it that we can respond and react and do whatever we do, mostly probably react and then respond to information showing up. And it's like, oh, they're doing that over there. What if we do that over here? And it's giving permission, or it creates a state of permission and acceptance that, oh, which is different than having to be the one the first time. And we all know as first children what they can be like, the training's all done on us. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm not a first child, but I was the first and only girl. So
yeah.
I understand those kind of responding to those pictures. I was getting the impression too about consciousness coming into form as like contractions. And, the process of giving birth is your body's muscles are automatically expanding and contracting as it's squeezing that watermelon out your butt kind of thing. And
your butt. Oh,
exactly.
Oh, really? Oh,
there's a video going around on Facebook of a childbirth educator showing about what contractions are by putting a ping pong ball inside a pink balloon.
Okay.
And blowing it up, and then what happens is that the balloon, if you try to squeeze it out one way, the ping pong ball is at the bottom of the balloon and blocks the air from getting out, and so then you have to squeeze it in certain ways, and it gives you a visual image of what your uterus is doing as it's releasing that, and which is pretty hilarious. Then the comments were pretty hilarious, is because a ping pong ball really you should be doing this with a softball,
right?
Because, and exactly, but each of us can relate to that, whether we've had children or not. We can relate to how our own growth evolves through our lifetimes, because we go through times of contraction and discomfort and expansion and discomfort, and that's what we're witnessing in the world today. Is it seems to me like the expansions and contractions are coming faster, and the responding and reaction is happening faster because as you alluded to, that the communication around the world is instantaneous. We can see somebody recording the protests in Thailand on their phone.
Time.
We see exactly what's happening now, whereas in the past, you had to wait 6 months for a letter to come by sea.
Yeah.
So, I think that it just mimics what's going on within us as we have greater consciousness in our bodies. We're accessing our greater wisdom, and it's bumping up against our greatest unconsciousness inside us as well.
What I really catch in that, Joan, is that that's what we're designed to do. And sometimes we forget that. And it's the meaning we ascribe to something that is what we do, and it puts a judgment on it. But that's how species are propagated, right? That's how they go on to the next generation. It's about birth. And we can have our own personal experiences with that, and that will vary. And for some reason, something happens that people are willing to do it again. And that oxytocin, is that it? That's that binding agent there. So we're designed. So if we think to avoid something or be in denial of it, as opposed to being a place of acceptance that this could be good, this could be all right, and take my judgment out of it, and the fact that my mother went through horrendous labor, and see, the story starts invading and infiltrating what is just something that happens, and it's interesting to me.
Yeah, and that brings up all sorts of birth stories, and I think I will spare the public of my birth story because it's time for another commercial break. So stay tuned. We will be talking more about consciousness and standing in our truths when we come right back.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs. Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, here in Tacoma, and I am with my host, Janet, there in Portland, and we are talking about consciousness and standing in our truths.
Yeah. How deep do we stand in our truth, maybe?
Knee deep?
Knee deep, a puddle. I mean, I think it's important to recognize that we have truth within us, and it's how much we deviate or don't deviate from that place. I mean, how much we allow ourselves to be compromised. And then so after a while, you don't notice it. And I think that's something to be aware of, and not judging in any of that. It's just about noticing where you are to your center, to your core, to your essence, however you want to use the terminology. And in that authentic voice in your day-to-day experiences, how you are there. And or not. And I think you're always there, because that's my belief. It's just where you are in the spectrum that being there is. So.
That was a wonderful sentence of Zen riddles.
Yeah, maybe so.
I would say that you are always consciousness. So as your greater essence, you are always consciousness, but you may not always feel aligned within your physical body and within your personality. And that's the whole disconnect. And if I remember back to what we started with, we told people to stay tuned to discover how to be aligned with your integrity in a state of harmony and grace. Have we just teased them unmercifully?
Well, I think that's something this show is always about, how to be, just access that point. And I'm going to say heart, only because it makes it more tangible. That's the only reason I use that word. But heart means physical. It means emotional terrain. It means core essence of all. So a lot of people get stuck with location and organisms and stuff, and it's not about that. It's about taking something that, how do I connect to that? Putting your awareness that, oh, it starts from in me, and then it ripples out. So go to that place. Just shift your focus. You don't have to go down. You don't have to go up. You don't have to go anywhere. Just shift your focus to that within you. There it is. And notice what that is. For most people, they're going to recognize that as a quiet. Some are going to call it sacred. The words aren't important. It's the experience of it. And in that stillness, and I think the reason stillness comes to mind is because there's no doing. It's just an informational state of awareness. And you have senses, so that's going to give it a particular flavor. And it's still about being connected. And you be in that place and you observe. And see, the trick is when I use the word the observe, it feels that it's I-oriented. And that's not our intention. It's about being oriented. It's information. And how do you hold awareness of it? You can go the claircognizant route where you have no knowledge of something, but you just have awareness of information. You can go through a sensory, physical sense where you hear things or see things or whatever it is. It's just this place. And some people call it intuitive, and some people call it psychic, and some people blah, 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 blah. We just come out of different traditions, that's all.
We do, and people access consciousness by going deep into the heart, but sometimes they access consciousness by going deep into the seat of the soul, which is just a different perspective of it.
It's just a different word, that's all.
And one of the things I notice when I go deep, I suddenly actually become more aware of my outside surroundings and more in clarity, like the fact that we have 3 minutes left, so it's time to invite you to go deeper with us and connect with us beyond the show. Would you like to dive in and our website?
You can join us at www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com, and then you'll find out all our podcasts and about our great blogs we both write, and about our meetup schedules that we each offer, and about working with you out there as clients or however you want to frame yourself. So life is good. This is an excellent place to be. That's what I'm holding awareness of.
Yes. So if anything you want to know about us, you can find out at ConsciousConversationsWithJoanandJanet.com. And Janet has meetups on Tuesday night and on Thursday afternoons. And you've got Zoom groups
groups starting tomorrow. Please consider joining us. They're good.
Yes. So find out more about that on the website. And I have a meetup this weekend in Seattle at Montlake on Sunday the 4th from 2 to 4. I'm in University Place on the 18th, also from 2 to 4. And then I'm at the Emerald Spiral this month in Kent on the 24th. And all those details are on the website.
Yeah, it's nice to be in person. And then when you hear something, it's a different mechanism when you see something. And when you can hear and see something like a video, that's why we like that, because we're getting information in a couple of different ways. And then, of course, you can't believe what you see and you can't believe what you hear. So what do you do with that? Join Joan in person wherever she's going to be up there. Come see us. Yeah.
We did that really quickly.
In a flash, in an instant, change happens, right? That's the energy. That's the way energy works.
That's true.
Yeah.
You blink an eye and it has changed.
Different.
Well, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in and listening. And it doesn't matter what time or space that you are in tuning in. There is no time or space as consciousness. So you are actually joining with us in this very moment, helping to create this morphic field and this wonderful experience that we've been having. So we really appreciate you.
Thank you so very, very much, everyone. It's so always heart-opening to be with you.
Tune in next week, same time, same channels.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And thanks so much for helping to co-create the show, no matter if you're listening live or on demand. You energetically contribute to our collective experience. Joan and Janet love to hear from you and invite you to email your comments and ideas for them to explore each week. Contact them at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another great show, and until then, keep enjoying this wonderful adventure we call life.